what was really great was when we first got online in the server, because when all the faces started appearing on the screen, it was really the sense that you were being part of something new and something really real, or on the cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. From our end, there was a sense of real achievement and real relief for a range of reasons. One, because we had never done an online studio before. We had to cobble together a computer lab that would be able to handle it. We had to go and buy some webcams to set up
And headsets.
And headsets, yeah. I had to use my own Visa card to buy the headsets, and that's on camera.
We'll get paid for them.
And so we had such a sense of accomplishment that at our end we managed to get things together, and then to actually make contact with the other side of the world was ecstatic. Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of this sort of space age feel for us, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was a real person at the other end. It wasn't a computer program or some game like Quake where you then were online. You actually saw a living, breathing person who was laughing and crying and crying. This is great, and
and so there's a mixture of on the one hand a kind of elation, and then on the other hand a sense of how tenuous it is, this link, because it always seems as if the technology is about to fall over or something, but somehow it manages, and it was really good.
Well, no, and that was part of what created there was this technical thing, but then there's also the aspect of the language and the national culture. You find everyone has their preconceptions about what the Germans are like or what the New Zealanders are like, and then there's things that are more cultural in the aspect of the universities, where we found out very early on that the studio culture in Auckland was much more conceptually based on the way in for the students, whereas our students had a very much more technical or practical orientation. Mm-hmm. And that created a very strong dichotomy between different groups about how to get into the problem.
Yeah. So there were two kinds of issues in terms of the question of communicability. One certainly was a simple kind of technical issue about the barriers and obstacles simply to the technology being transparent. You and I are sitting here just talking. There's no kind of techno barrier to us just chit-chatting. And I think the technological setup was a genuine kind of barrier to free flow. And then at the cultural level, cultures in many respects at design setup level, at language level, even in the level that most of our design studio were women, and most of your design studio were men. That also set up an interesting kind of difference as well. Probably while the technological barriers were a genuine obstacle, those cultural differences were actually aspects that generated something very interesting. They added to the possibilities in the design process. Yeah, one thing that I didn't necessarily think would have to happen in in the interpretation of the design brief, and admittedly it was a very conceptual brief, but it seemed that each of the pairings of partners, in one way or another, kind of converged on thinking of what the design process required was developing a portal of some kind. And it surprised me that although each of the portals for each of the groups differed, I think we would say they were each ended up doing a portal of some kind. And that surprised me a little bit because I didn't necessarily think that was the convergence point for the design brief. Did you find, you or Andreas find it a little bit, Andreas is behind the camera so you can't see him, did you or Andreas find it a little surprising that the portal became the generic kind of approach?
Well, I wasn't too surprised because of the work we'd done with Liquid Campus, where we'd asked about designing a virtual campus and not explaining if it had to be only web-based or partly physical or completely physical, but that the students were free to choose, and that became a very big issue as well. And I think part of it has to do with the self-referential nature of the project, where we were asking people to design buildings that can communicate with one another, and at the same time they're doing exactly that. And so this kind of navel gazing brings them to where's the stumbling point right now, and that stumbling point is this portal where the singularity develops from their own discussions to go through the wire to the other end, and that becomes automatically a focus point because it's such, as you say, in their face in this very intensive period.
And I guess what they see in front of them is, how do I realize this gateway in order that it could become something that I handle, and it then becomes that which I'm designing, because it ends up being the framework by which I can design. We might have wanted each of the projects to move beyond that.
Well, we discussed about how the projects that arrived after the 2 weeks, which we originally said 1 week, and that was much too short, but 2 weeks was really also too short to make anything other than a design intention. And I think that what came out of it was very, very good. More than pleased with what the students were able to develop in this short, intensive time period. But you also knew they couldn't keep this up at this rate. That was pretty much the end of this kind of intensity level. And that really what they need is, as you said earlier, a time to pause and reflect, to be able to go at a more relaxed pace into the design. And maybe then the communication wouldn't be in their face as much if they're much more used to, okay, well now I'm going to speak with my partner again. That portal aspect isn't so predominant.
As the technology itself becomes a little more in the background, so their design thinking opens up to other kinds of issues. You suggested earlier that maybe the kinds of ideas that emerged in the project, and here we're thinking probably the ideas are ones that are invoking more design process than design product, because I think all of the projects were focusing on kind of the process of design. None of them realized in any definitive sense an outcome. That they kind of coalesce around projects that work on a one-to-one basis, or one-to-many, or many-to-one, or many-to-many. Do you want to say something about how you're reading that, the one and the many?
Well, I know that some of the projects took right away this idea of transceiver-receiver, and it always became a dialogue. It was always in their project a dialogue, whereas I know from one of the Kenyan students, they developed more of a thesis about a cultural center, and it didn't become a German-New Zealand cultural center, but it evolved into a sort of herd of cultural centers spread out over the world, with each culture being part of this network, and then having this portal again.
Yeah.
But their concept then had to change from people where it was basically just a one-to-one conversation, because then they had, okay, there's an event taking place in this one, and that means everyone else is a spectator, or you could also say that they're propagating it in the one-to-many, or that there are groups or constellations of things that take place. And so I wanted to say to the students that we found the work really good, and
really good.
want to applaud them all, and hope that this at least is in some way a token of our appreciation for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Then I'll see you online again.
See you online again.